This video is going to have a look at plants and how they can defend themselves from attack. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is what chemicals that plants can make. And one of the key ones that you need to know for the exam is what lupin the plant can make. So lupin is a plant that when it's young can produce a chemical, and that chemical is called an alkaloid. They are poisonous chemicals which when ingested by an insect can kill them. And looking at hormones, which we've been looking at in another part of this topic, of course, they're produced and stopped at different times of the day. So in the morning when the sun comes up, they start producing these chemicals, and then at night when the sun goes down, the chemicals stop being produced because they don't have to defend themselves at that time. Right, so that part of the video looked at what happens when something attacks the plant. Now we're going to have a look at what the plant does to fend off different insects. And one of the key examples is what potatoes do, which we're going to have a look at now. Now what these can do is they can produce things called pathogens. A pathogen is any chemical that kills things. So the main thing that kills and affects potatoes is something called the potato blight. So what the actual potatoes have developed and evolved to do is produce a chemical that kills specifically them. Now the good thing about this is scientists, if they can find out how to make that chemical, can use it as a pesticide on crops. So even the potatoes that don't produce this chemical, it can be used to stop them from killing and attacking the rest of the potato crop. Why is this important, you ask? Well, the key example is famine. Famine is bad. And what we mean by that, by famine, is where there's not enough food to support the population. So what we have to do is kill the pests, which is good. An example where this occurred was in 1845 to 1846, where there was a massive famine. And what actually happened is these potato blights, which are little fungus creatures that are produced by fungal plants, and they got into the plants, into potato stocks, and wiped them all out. So there was a massive famine which killed over 1 million people. Okay, the next section then is going to have a look at making use of these chemicals. So it's all good the plants being able to use them, but what we want to do is take those chemicals that they make and make them useful for us, because that's a good thing. So whilst a lot of these chemicals can be dangerous, if used in the right way and in small amounts, they've actually been proved to be quite helpful to humans. So the two examples you need to know, the first one is aspirin. Now aspirin is a chemical that is taken from willow trees, and it's used to prevent pain and fever, which is obviously good, and you've probably used them quite a lot. The next one is quinine, and I can never pronounce this. It's from the cinchona tree. I think that's how you pronounce it, and I can't even spell it either. And that is something that is used to treat diseases like malaria. Okay, so the next bit then is going to have a look at an example of where plants and defences and chemicals have been discovered. And the guy we're going to have a look at is Louis Pasteur. He's a science bloke, and he was born in 1822 and died in 1895. He discovered, and it's a really interesting thing, that it was actually microbes that cause things to go off. So before that we just thought it was anything exposed to air went off. But he found out it wasn't air, it was the microbes in the air. And he did it by using this experiment that you can see here. So he had this round bottom flask, and what he did was he put in a broth. He heated it up to cook it, and then he just left it in the air. So when air and microbes were there and they reacted with it, after 4 days he'd found out that it had gone off. So he then repeated the experiment using a slightly different round bottom flask. As you can see here, it had this little bit at the bottom. So what he did was he had the air go in again, he heated it up and boiled it for an hour, and then after 4 days it hadn't gone off. Why? And the answer for this is the microbes settled at the bottom here. So they actually stopped there and only the air went into the broth. This meant no microbes and the food didn't go off, which is a good thing and a huge breakthrough. The final bit of this video then is going to have a look at what this led to, and one of the key things is aseptic techniques. The main one, and the one that you need to know for the exam, is pasteurization. So for example, food like milk, they heated it briefly, exactly the same way that they did with the broth, and that killed any bacteria in the solution. That meant that it could be stored and it would last a hell of a lot longer. That's the end.